I'm Harriet Carty. I'm the Director of Caring for God's Acre. I'm really delighted to be doing this webinar with my new colleague, Hannah, who's recently joined us as our Biodiversity Data Manager. And about the first thing we asked her to do was to do a webinar. And very nicely, Hannah's agreed on, oh, I think it's week 3, isn't it, Hannah?
Yes, I
Something
think
like
so.
so that's really, really lovely. We're really looking forward to hearing what Hannah has to say about biodiversity recording and how to record. We are recording this webinar, as you probably just heard. The voice said that it was recording, and so we've turned off all your cameras and all your microphones for anybody who's sensitive about being recorded, and also just to make the webinar run smoothly. We will be taking questions and answers at the end. We're expecting to speak for about 40 minutes-ish, 45, that sort of thing. Then there'll be time for questions and answers. We'll just keep them going as long as the questions come, but understand that some of you may need to leave after an hour because this is a 1 hour webinar. So please, if you've got questions, just type them in the chat, type them as we go along or save them to the end, whichever you prefer. If you put in a question and it gets answered later, that's fine. That's often happening. We'll manage that. And then at the end, I'll just read out the questions and myself or Hannah will answer them. Still, people are coming in thick and fast. So I'll just wait a minute more before actually starting. We've got captions available for this webinar if people find it easier to read what we're saying as well as listening to a webinar. If you go to More at the bottom of your screens, on the banner at the bottom of your screens, you'll see a circle with 3 dots in and More. If you click on that, you'll be able to, I'll just do it to remind myself what it says, show captions. If you click on show captions, then you will get the captions. And similarly, if you get fed up with them halfway through, you can just turn them off in the same way. And they're still coming in thick and fast. Welcome to anybody who's just joined. Lovely to have you all here for this our first warm-up webinar for the Churches Council on Nature webinars to come during Love Your Burial Ground Week in June. We will be taking questions at the end. And so meanwhile, I'm just asking people, put your name and say hello in the chat just to remind yourselves that's where the chat is, because that's how we're going to ask you to submit questions that we'll answer at the end. I think it's probably time that we started. So this is the warm-up to the Church of England's webinar series during Love Your Burial Ground Week with Churches Council on Nature 2026, which is just about to start. If you haven't already registered for an event or found one that you'd like to go and attend near where you live, please have a look on the Caring for God's Acre website and you'll find out all about it. It's running from the 6th to the 14th of June. And during Churches Count on Nature in particular, but Love Your Burial Ground Week generally, we're just encouraging people to do some biological recording, which sounds very formal, but really it's just spotting nature. So we're encouraging people to do that. And this webinar is to help you get going on that journey, learn about a bit about a biological record, learn why we want them, why these places are so special, and how to make a record. I'm going to do the first part of the webinar and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Hannah. She's in control of the PowerPoint, so I'm going to have to say next at the end of my slides, which will take us all back to those lockdown days, won't it? So next. Oh, yes, thank you, Hannah. Great. It does work. A little bit of a delay, but it does work. So I'm Harriet, I'm the Director of Caring for God's Acre. I recognise many of the names of the people who've put something in the chat, but for those of you that are new to our webinar series and to our charity, Caring for God's Acre is a conservation charity and we specialise in burial grounds of all sizes, types and denominations.
Harriet,
So,
excuse me. We're not seeing the PowerPoint. or at least
Right.
I'm not.
Are other people seeing the PowerPoint? I am. If you're not, do you want to quickly pop something in the chat?
Okay, good. That's fine
Right.
then. Sorry to have interrupted you.
No, no, that would be dreadful if no one could see their PowerPoint. Good. If for any reason you can't, you can just pop something in the chat and Anna will I'm sure help if she can. But it sounds like most people are. We're also, yes, so that's caring for God's Acre. We're also environmental advisors to the Church of England. Next. So I'm often asked why burial grounds should get a special charity all of their own. They are really, really special places, as I'm sure you're all aware, as well as holding fantastic wildlife. They're beautiful, beautiful, calm, peaceful places. They hold fantastic built heritage, and also they really encompass the social history of a community. Next. So, sticking with the biodiversity, there are over 25,000 burial grounds. We're still not quite sure exactly how many there are exactly. Part of that is because do you count as an extension, as an extra site, or as the same one? Maybe it's in a slightly different place. There's a few things that make it difficult to do, but also because of the different ownerships and the way they're managed by different organisations. But we think there's definitely over 25,000 in the UK, probably much nearer 30,000, if not over that. And whilst most of them are small, I mean, some of the cemeteries are larger, but most of them are relatively small. They're real little hotspots of biodiversity. And if you look at this map, which comes from the Church Heritage Records of England and Wales, each one of those crosses represents a church or chapel or a cemetery chapel. And so around all of those is a burial ground. And I think that really gives you an idea of how scattered they are right across the country. Hopefully I'm unmuted now. With the absence of actually the tops of mountains, they're more or less everywhere. Cumulatively, again, we don't know quite how many there are, and we don't know quite what area they cover, but it is thought to be in the sort of range of that of a small national park. So a really significant land holding. And unlike a small national park, it's not in one place, they're all across the country, as this map shows. So just imagine how good they are as stepping stones for creatures on the move, whether it's on annual migrations or moving in the wake of climate change, moving to cooler places. And also imagine if everybody who was caring for one of these beautiful places did something for nature, however small or large, something for nature. Recovery of our very beleaguered wildlife really can start here. Next. So why are burial grounds so good for nature? They weren't ever created as nature reserves. They're not nature reserves now. They've got a very important function, and it isn't that. So why are they so good? It's really to do with their age and their longevity of management. Just to deal with their age first. This slide shows you Canaan Church, which is a 12th century church. The tower and the nave are 12th century. The rest of it is Victorian. And a great many of our churches will have been first created within communities at about that sort of time, about the 12th, 13th century, many in Georgian times, many in Victorian times. But a great many of them are very old. And the building, unlike Canaan, where we still do have the 12th century elements of it, may have been completely changed over the years. You can have a completely modern or Victorian church on a very, very ancient site. And of course, although the building's changed, the churchyard hasn't. The churchyard will have remained more or less the same. It may have grown, it may have been extended, but it won't have shrunk. Now, with this one, you get some good clues that it's an ancient site. You can see a preaching cross there in the middle of the picture. There's also an ancient yew at Canaan. But even so, they really are fantastic little ancient places that are just waiting to be explored. Next. Old places and also continuously managed year on year. And if you're somebody who's looking after a churchyard or a chapel yard or a cemetery now, thank you very much. You're part of a long, long chain in many cases, going back down the decades and more. This is our volunteers scything. That used to be how churchyards were managed back in the day. They'd have been shut up for a hay crop, and that was taken, scythed and raked off, and then after that they'd have been grazed to keep the grass down. Many people do still scythe them, but an awful lot of them don't. They're cut now more usually by mowers or by strimmers, but it's still grassland management. It's still more or less the same. Churchyards, chapel yards, cemeteries, they've always been a mosaic of trees and grassland and stonework. Sometimes they would have been neglected during wars, during times of pandemics and disease. Tools have changed, as we see, but basically it's continuous management from the time when that churchyard was set out as a distinct space, and that carries on to this day. And that's rare. That's rare in our busy and changing country with a lot of people living in it and great changes in agriculture. Next. Just to run through a few of the features that are so special about burial grounds. Many of them contain ancient trees. I think I've said how old they are about 4 times now, so no need to say it again. But of course, in an ancient place, you will get old trees. And in the case of our yew trees, some of them predate Christianity in the UK. So they go back to pagan times. The ancient and veteran yews of Britain are of global importance. There's no other country with anything like the same population of this species of this age. So they really, really are special. Next. But as well as the yews, we have all sorts of other veteran trees. This fantastic oak is in Stafford and Castle Church. Next. So once a site has been set, a church building has been built, whatever that may be. The first one might have been a wooden building at that point. A churchyard has been created. You then will create a barrier around it. That will come quite soon after. That might have started off as a fence or a hedge, but pretty soon they all seem to have gone to walls, either dry stone or lime mortar. So your wall, your churchyard wall, may actually be the oldest built structure in your parish. It will have been mended a bit over the years, bits will have fallen off, people will have plonked a bit more on. If an extension has been brought to the churchyard, that they might have moved it a little bit, but basically that wall will have been there for a long, long time, and it becomes almost a complete ecosystem. You'll find flowering plants, lichens, ferns, mosses, as in this one, lovely ferns on this one. All sorts of invertebrates living within the cracks and crevices and inside the wall. Amphibians use walls a great deal. They're lovely, cool places for fogstails and newts. Great for reptiles, lizards and slow worms in particular. And do have a look out for wrens and dunnocks hopping around on a wall, picking off spiders and other invertebrates. Next. So that grassland that I've described being continuously managed over the years, that usually is a remnant of our old species-rich flowery meadowland, of which Britain has lost 97%. So although it's a small piece and it may not be in absolutely perfect condition, it's a really important little piece of habitat. Next. I've talked a lot about really ancient sites, 12th century Canaan, things like that, but the loss of habitat really accelerated from the 1960s onwards. It was happening earlier than that in some areas, but it's really post-war that so much of our agricultural land changed and so much meadow in particular was lost. So if you have any sort of burial ground that is older than the 1960s, it probably contains this flowery, lovely meadow. This slide is Shrewsbury Cemetery. Shrewsbury Cemetery, the old Victorian part of it. Shrewsbury Cemetery was kept short for a few decades. It was trimmed and mowed every 2 weeks across the growing season. And then when austerity struck the council, they reduced the mowing and cut it once or twice a year. This is year one. This is year one. That site had been absolutely trimmed to within an inch of its life for many years. And in year one, back came all these flowers. They were there. They were there. They weren't flowering. Their flowering heads were being cut off. You weren't able to see them, but the turf itself was intact. Almost all of a meadow is perennial. It isn't, they are not annuals there, and so they persist even if they're not able to set seed. Next. And for those of you who do have short grass, and it's great to have some short grass, there's many benefits to it within your churchyards and cemeteries. Look for clues of this ancient meadow within the short grass as well, particularly in the autumn. You'll find all sorts of grassland fungi, such as these wax caps and spindles and earth tongues, which will give you an idea. Next. The other great feature of churchyards, particularly that they're really well known for ecologically, are the lichens. The lichens, particularly on the stonework. Lichens occur on all sorts of other things. They occur on wood, on living trees, even been found on rubber dustbin lids, all sorts of places. But the lichens on the stone in churchyards are really special. So from the 17th century on, it became the fashion to mark graves with permanent markers, more than just the Lord of the Manor. More people wanted to have their graves marked and were able to afford that. And they used different stone types, and the carvings and the orientation allowed up different lichen species to colonize those stones. It's not that rare to have over 100 lichen species in one churchyard, and that may include rarities, particularly if you live in an area with very few natural rocky outcrops. It's definitely the busman's holiday for a lichenologist. Next. So, as well as rarities and special habitats and things like that, burial grounds are also really good refuges for common species, the species we might find in our gardens, such as this lovely frogs. Amphibians spend most of the year out of ponds, actually. They come to our garden ponds to breed and then they migrate out, and a burial ground is perfect for them. One of the great features of it is hopefully no chemicals are used at all that would be taken up by the amphibian's sensitive skin. So they're full of invertebrates, they're full of damp places, dry places, holes, nooks, crannies, dead wood, all the things that species need to survive. Next. So many of the things that you might see in your garden and think, oh yeah, that's my robin that comes to my bird feeder, it might actually be spending a lot of its life in the local churchyard. So I'd now just like to spend a few minutes telling you how recording wildlife, knowing what's there, finding out what's there, asking experts and those interested to come and have a look can really help those of you who are managing churchyards, chapel yards and cemeteries. Next. My first example is this little chap. This is a hairy-footed flower bee, and thank you to BugLife for this beautiful picture. This is a solitary bee. It looks like a bumblebee, but actually it's a solitary bee, and it's a very early bee to emerge. It's one of the first ones that you'll see. They come out from February, and you'll see them active around the place until about June. So coming out early in February or March, depends where you are in the country, of course, when they'll start to appear. They really need nectar. They really need food. And they particularly like flowers with bell shapes, such as lungwort, comfrey, dead nettles, but they'll also use other flowers. Primroses are quite a favourite. So if you know you have this lovely little hairy-footed flower bee, you can celebrate it. You can tell people about it. And perhaps if you've got flower beds or planters, you can plant some of those early flowers, early nectar sources, and focus on those bell-shaped flowers in particular. Next. We've already had one little shot of a hedgehog, but I couldn't resist saying a bit more about them. Hedgehogs love churchyards and chapel yards. They're fantastic for them, partly because they're not overmanaged. They have lots and lots of nooks and crannies and holes, whether it's gaps in chest tombs or places underneath tussocks of grass, in dead wood, bits of scrub. They're really good for hedgehogs. Lots of invertebrates there because they are, as I've said before, usually chemical free. Now, hedgehog likes to travel about 1 kilometre every night, trundling around finding things to eat. And occasionally they'll very politely use a lovely hedgehog hotel, such as the picture here that somebody's put in a chest in. But usually you won't see the animal because if they're out in the daylight, there's almost something wrong with them. They are very nocturnal. And you won't actually necessarily have them where you can know where they are within your churchyard. They'll just be passing through. So you might know that there's a hedgehog there because you'll see a bit of hedgehog poo, as in my picture down in the left-hand corner. That's my brother's finger pointing at some hedgehog poo actually on the lawn. So you might need a bit of help identifying that. So it's really worth seeing if somebody who's interested in mammals, perhaps a local mammal group person or just an enthusiast, just will keep an eye and let you know if there's signs of hedgehog. Because of course, if you know they're there, as with the bee, you can do something about it. And that might be making some deadwood piles in a nice damp place that they're going to fill up with slugs and snails and worms and all sorts of juicy, crunchy invertebrates that they like to eat. A leaf pile would be another useful thing. Telling your neighbours that they're there, and perhaps you can create a sort of hedgehog street, making little gaps in fences to let the hedgehog move freely. Learn what a hibernating hedgehog looks like. It actually looks like a football of leaves. Useful to know that if you're managing a site. And also, hedgehogs are really inquisitive and they can get into all sorts of scrapes. The things they can fall into is many and varied. So just wander around your site going, could a hedgehog fall in here and could it get back out? Have you got a drain at the bottom of the gutter that perhaps just putting a piece of wood on a slant would allow things to climb out of it? Are there any little bits of wire netting they could tangle in? Things like that. Try and channel your inner hedgehog and look around for possible dangers. Next. This is my next one, slow worm. I think they're very under-recorded in burial ground slow worms because we often find them and our volunteers out report finding them quite often. They're hard to spot. They don't come out and bask in the open like, say, lizards. They warm up under things. And this is a picture of me finding a slow worm with young Ollie Logan, the son of our volunteer manager, from under a little refuge sheet that we've put out. But without something like that, it'd be very difficult to know that they were there. But again, it's really, really useful for a site manager to know whether slow worms and other reptiles are there, not least because they're very well protected and you could inadvertently break the law if you don't know they're there and you do something that can damage them. If you have got slow worms, the best way to avoid damaging them is just don't cut your grass too short. Raise the blade, raise the cutter bar on any mowers so that it's a little bit high and it'll go straight over the animal and you won't actually damage them. Similarly, maybe try and avoid cutting first thing in the morning when they're still slow. When they've had a chance to warm up, they're pretty nippy and they can get out of the way. Next. So here's a swift, very politely using a swift box. Usually, sparrows, in my experience, use swift boxes, though I am told that an awful lot of them are used by swifts. You can put swift boxes on walls with permission. You can also put them behind the louvres in a tower, and they can be really successful. But the other place that swifts like to nest is under the eaves on top of the wall plate. And that has real serious implications for any of you who might be considering doing any work to your roofs or to your gutters, because you'll need scaffolding, and the top of the scaffolding will come absolutely in line with the top of the wall. And so you can inadvertently block off nesting sites. And that can have two really serious implications. One is that swifts, who are very site faithful, will literally bash repeatedly into the scaffolding. They can even kill themselves, and they certainly may not breed that year. The other is that you could block off a nest without knowing it's there, and actually the young would starve. And as well as both of those things being really sad and obviously not something that anybody would want to do, they are also illegal. So knowing that you have nesting swifts is really helpful for those who are caring for the building. And they're not easy. They're not easy. Unlike swallows and martins, they don't visit the nest very often and they don't leave a mess. You won't see any droppings underneath the nest. So looking for screaming parties of swifts circling around a church building, that will tell you it's really likely they're nesting here. And then if you know you've got some work to do, you can look in more detail, or you can simply plan the work when they're not here. They're only here for about 4 months of the year. So it's quite easy to manage around them, but only if you'll know that they're there, and not easy to find out on the year that you're wanting to do the roofing work. So I hope that's shown you how useful having biological records can be for a site manager, both giving you things to celebrate and also really useful management tools that can help you manage well and stay within the law. I'm now going to hand over to Hannah, who's going to tell you more about recording generally and how to go about it.
Perfect. Thank you, Harriet. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay, I've got some thumbs up, brilliant. Excellent. So I'm Hannah Risser. So as Harriet said, I'm the new Biodiversity Data Manager at Caring for God's Acre. And today I'll be giving an introduction to biological recording, showing you how to use the iNaturalist app on your phone and going over how your wildlife records are used by us and others. So, just to start with, what is a biological record? So, a biological record describes the presence of an organism at a specified time and place by a named individual. And there are 4 basic pieces of information that we need to make a biological record, and these are also known as the 4 Ws. So, I'll describe each of these in turn and explain why we need that information. So, the first thing we need to know is who recorded it. And knowing this allows verifiers to get back to you with any queries about the record. So, for example, if you say you've seen something that's quite uncommon in that area, they might get in touch to see if you have any further information, like a photograph. And you can see in my example biological record at the bottom of the slide that I've put my full name. Secondly, we need to know what species you found, and we need to know this in as much detail as possible. So this would ideally be in the format of an exact species name. But if you can't quite narrow it down that far, that's okay, don't worry. A higher level grouping can also still be useful. And then next up, we need to know when you observed the species. So knowing the precise date rather than just the month or year makes your record much more valuable to people for analysing the data later on. And lastly, we need to know where you found the species. Ideally, you'll give the location a clearly identifiable name that another person could find on a map, like I have done in the example on the slide where I've put Parkside Cemetery in Kendal, Cumbria, which is just down the road from where I live. And in this record, I've also added the Ordnance Survey grid reference for the location, and that's really helpful. I've put a link on the screen as well to the Bedfordshire Natural History Society's grid reference tool that can help you find the grid reference for your site by just entering the postcode. So there are several ways that you can submit biological records from your burial ground in a way that they will come through to us. So in this webinar, I'll mainly be explaining in detail how to use the iNaturalist app on your smartphone. And this is really the method we'd recommend for beginners, so those who are fairly new to recording wildlife. And I'll also touch briefly upon the other 2 record submission methods that we recommend. So what is iNaturalist? To put it simply, it's a global platform allowing people to share biodiversity data and learn more about nature. And it works by having users submit a photograph of the species that they saw and then choosing the species they think they found. And the app gives suggestions for probable species using AI image recognition. So it isn't always correct, but it does do quite a good job. And once the user submits their record, it then becomes viewable on the app by other people. And other users, who are often absolute experts in their fields will then look at your record and either agree with the species you assigned it to be or suggest an alternative identification. And once the identification has been agreed by multiple users, the record becomes research grade. And what makes this app great is that no prior knowledge about biodiversity is needed. So all you need is a smartphone and a willingness to learn. And the application allows contributors to collect meaningful data about biodiversity and share this with charities like Caring for God's Acre, as well as researchers and decision makers. And we found that it's an excellent way of engaging new audiences with the environment. The app is really easy to use with a simple user interface. And in particular, it can be a great way of engaging children with biodiversity. I think personally that the method of entering records and then being able to see all of the species that you've personally found feels to me like a real life version of playing Pokemon Go, which is a great way to get children involved. So how does one actually use the app? Right, so I'll just go into a bit more detail about using the app itself. And just one thing to note is that the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with attendees as well as on the Church of England website. So I recommend that you just sit back and listen rather than trying to set up the app in real time. You can then come back to this recording or one of the many resources on our website when you're ready to set up the app. So first of all, you'll need to download the iNaturalist app from either the App Store if you have an iPhone or from Google Play if you have an Android. And if you have an iPhone, you'll find that there are two versions of the iNaturalist app available on the App Store. So it's important that you download the one shown on the screen here called iNat Classic, and this will allow you to engage with the Caring for God's Acre Burial Grounds project that we run. So once it's downloaded to your phone, open the app and create an account if you don't have one already. And you'll probably be sent an email asking you to confirm your registration and click on a link to activate your account. So go ahead and do that. And then you can log straight into your account on the app. So once you're logged into the app, you'll want to join our project, and that's called the Beautiful Burial Grounds Project. So to do this, you'll open the app and you'll see in the bottom of the screen there are a few buttons. So you want to press the projects button. And then when you're in there, click on the little search icon and you want to search for Beautiful Burial Grounds. And once that project comes up, you click on it, scroll down to the bottom of the information page and press join. And you'll now be a member of our project straight away. You don't need to wait for us to approve your application or anything. You'll just be able to see it. So once you have that, you're ready to add an observation. So you can either do this when you're out and about surveying your burial ground, and this is best done if you've got mobile signal at your burial ground, but you can also do it later on if you don't have signal, once you've gotten home, as long as you've taken some photos. So what you want to do in the app is tap Observe, and then it'll ask you to add one or more photos as evidence. You then want to choose what you think you saw, and when you saw it should be added automatically based on the sort of date information in your phone, and where you saw it should also be added automatically. And then what you want to do is tap Projects at the bottom of the screen and then select Beautiful Burial Grounds and tap Save or Share. And that's pretty straightforward, but I'll just show you a little video on the screen of something that you might need to do. So as you can see, this is our project. So you tap Observe, go into your camera, roll. I've clicked the species I want to identify and it hasn't come up with a location for some reason. So I will just go in and search the postcode of where I know the burial ground is. So in this case, it's the Kendal Cemetery. Click on that, try and find it on the map. So scroll to it, and then I'll zoom in on the specific tree that I found. And then using that location data, it'll help suggest information about species that might be present. So here I've chosen the common yew, and then I've added it to Beautiful Burial Grounds and pressed share. And that is all you need to do. That is how you share a record, and then it will go into the process to being seen by other people and confirmed or having the identification changed. Right. So yeah, that's really the main bits about it. I'll talk a bit more in a second about other resources and how you can get in touch with us if you've got any issues. But that's really what you need to get your record and take it ready for submission. But there are a few extra things that you can do to make your record even more useful. So if you're comfortable doing so, you can add your real name to the display name section in your profile. And this means that any subsequent use of your records or images will be attributed to you rather than your username. And the other important thing that we recommend that you do is choose as open of a license as possible for your records to allow them to be shared to iRecord and iNaturalist and then eventually to us. And both of these changes you can make in the settings page on iNaturalist, either on your phone or if you go onto the website, you can log in there and make the changes. So we've got a ton of additional resources on our website to help you out, including some really detailed videos that go through each of the steps to add your record. And there's also various resources available on the iNaturalist website itself, including a community forum. So if you have questions, you can either see if someone's already asked it on there, or you can post a thread yourself, or you're always willing to get in touch with me, always able to get in touch with me as well with your queries. And my email will be on the last slide. So yeah, do get in touch with anything. So you might be thinking, what should I actually record on iNaturalist? And the answer is anything and everything that grows or lives in the wild that you're able to photograph at any time of year. So this can be your everyday finds like pigeons and dandelions, all the way through to rarer species. It's all data and it's all very useful for us. So I'd also encourage you to record interesting looking things, even when you're really unsure what they are. So the picture on the bottom right of the slide is one I took whilst out recording some moths recently at a nature reserve. And I knew that it was some sort of leaf mining insect species, but I had absolutely no clue what it was. So I uploaded this to iNaturalist with a really vague identification, and within 12 hours I had a message from a sawfly expert saying that this was a nationally scarce species and had never before been recorded in Yorkshire. So that was really exciting, and it just goes to show that you never know what you might find. And if you're not sure what a species is, try to take multiple photos of the species from different angles and add them to the same observation. And this will make it a lot more likely for an expert to be able to identify what species it is. So for example, the diagnostic features needed to work out what the species is might be found on the underside and upper side of a species, so 2 photos might be needed. And another thing to note is that if you'd like to record cultivated garden plants, which you might find in burial grounds, you need to make sure when you're submitting the record that you mark it as captive or cultivated so that they don't show up in the maps of wild plants. So what happens next to your records once they're up on iNaturalist? So the records that you add will appear on the Beautiful Burial Grounds project on our main dashboard, and you can click through to this either on your phone or on a computer to see what and where people have been recording across the UK. And there's an interactive map as well as some interesting stats that I've shown on the slide, showing things like what the most commonly observed species are. And once records have gone through the iNaturalist verification process that I described earlier, they're then transferred to iRecord, where they go through another round of verification before being transferred to the NBN Atlas, which I'll talk more about later. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of other ways that you can send records to us if iNaturalist isn't possible for you. So particularly if you don't have access to a smartphone, you can download a recording form from our website, either in Excel or Word format. And the Word document recording form is perfect for printing out and handing out to volunteers. And once you fill these in, you can send the copies back to us by email to inquiries@cfga.org.uk or by post. And then at Caring for God's Acre, we'll then upload the records to iRecord on your behalf. And we're always happy to do this. But if you do have the ability to use iNaturalist, we would really strongly encourage you to use that instead. And that's because the iNaturalist app supports the inclusion of photos, which helps the experts to verify your identification. Additionally, if any of those experts have queries about the data you submit, they can message you directly on the platform to resolve any issues, making it a lot more likely that your biological records will make it to the research grade status. Another way you can send records through to us is via iRecord, and this platform can also be accessed via a smartphone app or on a computer. And it isn't absolutely necessary to add photos to your records on iRecord, but it does help. And this is more recommended for the slightly more experienced biological recorder where you're already quite certain of what species you're recording. So where do the records actually go once they've been verified on iNaturalist and iRecord? So they go through to the NBN Atlas, which is a platform for sharing biodiversity data. So at Caring for God's Acre, we have our own portal on the NBN Atlas called the Beautiful Burial Grounds portal, and this shows any biodiversity data that has been uploaded to the NBN Atlas by any data provider that falls within our mapped burial grounds. So this portal, which I've provided the link to on this slide, is accessible to anyone, so we encourage you to go take a look and see what has been recorded in a burial ground near you. And the maps on the slide show the spread of burial grounds across England and Wales, and as you can see, there are quite a few. So if you zoom in on the interactive map, you can find the specific burial ground that you're looking for, and in this case, I've shown Canterbury Cathedral. So if you zoom in and then click on that burial ground, it'll bring up a list of biological records from the site, like the one shown above. And that can be really interesting to just know what is in your burial ground already, and also to let you know whether you need to do maybe a bit more targeted recording. And you might be surprised to see that the list of species at your chosen burial ground is quite small, even though you're certain there are a bunch of different species there. And this just means that there probably hasn't been that much biological recording at your site. So we need people like you to go out and add your observations on iNaturalist. So how do we use those records? So they're really vital to the work of Caring for God's Acre, and they enable us to gather evidence about the importance of burial grounds for nature by providing data that goes towards analysis and data summaries. And the data on the NBN Atlas also enables us to identify what species are present on the finer individual site scale, enabling us to recommend appropriate management techniques to site managers. The records on the NBN Atlas also feed directly into listings on the Church Heritage Record. So the example on the screen is from St John the Baptist, Stokesay in the Hereford Diocese. So if you click onto that church and you go to the Environment tab, you can find a summary of the species recorded in the associated burial ground. And the biodiversity data is considered when planning changes are submitted. So if a change goes through to faculty, the biodiversity impact will be considered, and this page will be considered. So records on the NBN Atlas are also used for some really exciting scientific research. So just as a quick example, in this paper from 2022, Robin Pakeman and colleagues used all the UK lichen data on the NBN Atlas from the 50-year period from 1970 to 2020 to create a range map for each individual lichen species, which allowed them to better understand the environmental conditions favoured by each lichen. And this just goes to show that your photograph of a lichen on a gravestone can go a really long way. So hopefully that's given you a good, quick introduction to the use of iNaturalist. And before we finish up the webinar and move to the Q&A section, I'd like to tell you a bit more about Churches Count on Nature, which is our annual event in June where we celebrate the wildlife found within our wonderful churchyards, chapel yards and cemeteries. So it's an initiative run by Caring for God's Acre, the Church of England, the Church in Wales and Risser UK. And this year it's taking place from Saturday the 6th of June to Sunday the 14th of June. And absolutely anyone can take part. And really probably the easiest way to get involved is by signing up to the Beautiful Burial Grounds project on iNaturalist that I've just described and entering your records there. And we also encourage people to run events, and the nature of your activity or event is completely up to you, but could involve anything from biodiversity recording events in the burial ground to talks about wildlife to building a bug hotel or organising conservation work parties. And it's up to you how big you want an event to be and whether you want to encourage family-friendly events, visits from local schools, or even visits from experts at a local wildlife trust. So please do take a look at our website for more information. We'll also be running several other really fascinating lunchtime webinars as part of Church's Count on Nature that I've listed here on the screen. So please do head over to our website to sign up. They will be very interesting. So yeah, I'm very excited to attend them all. And that is it from me and Harriet. So thank you so much. And I think we will have some time for Q&A now.
Thank you very much, Hannah. That was brilliant. And I'll just repeat again that you're on week 3 of your new job. So, you know, we're clearly very delighted to have you with us. I'm just going to work through the questions that we have. I'm just scrolling back because there was one from Anna Barrett early on. I'm not actually finding it, but oh yeah, no, there it is. Oh, it's gone again. Yeah. Basically asking whether an event needs to be large or small, really. I'm struggling to just find it exactly. But I think, Anna, you were basically saying, can we just go out and record, or do we need to run an event? And you can do either. You can do either, whatever you like, whatever fits for you. We'd love it if you'd register with us, because then you'll appear on the map and we'll know how many people are taking part, and that's always helpful to us. But the main thing is that you go out and do it and have a really lovely time. And you can always register afterwards, actually, when you've run the event. But you don't need to run something public. That's a much bigger commitment. You can just run something yourselves and have a look if you'd rather. Just going down, most of the questions are for you, Hannah. Peter Sims was asking about iNaturalist and iNat Classic, which you then answered, but did point out that I don't think our website has made that very clear. But I think you're changing that now, or have changed it, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm just in the process of updating all the documentation on the website. So those are a couple years old, so I will be going through that and making that a bit clearer. But yeah, do choose the classic app, because if you choose the other one, you'll be able to do everything, but you won't be able to add your record to the burial grounds project.
And Abby also asked about how to find something if it's not doing it automatically, but I think you answered that one as well, which is the postcode. So, and then as you showed us going in on the map, yeah.
Yeah, one thing as well that might be worth checking is if you go into the settings on your phone and then click through to the iNat Classic app, just check that you've allowed it to see your location. So if you've enabled sort of location sharing to the app, it should make it able to see where your record came from.
We have a question from Chloe Sastry who says, can I add a sighting to 2 projects simultaneously, e.g. this one and another individual cemetery?
Yeah, you should be able to. So when you're choosing the projects to add it to, just do the little checkbox on both of them.
Great. And Anna, you ask about your church field rather than a burial ground. Yes, please add it in. We'd love to hear about it. It sounds absolutely lovely, and you know that'll be fine. We don't necessarily need to know where the bodies are buried, as it were. Someone called Hodges has 2 questions: how to add an audio recording of a bird, how to set up your own project for your own churchyard. You can make recordings on iNaturalist, can't you?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how to add one that you've already taken, but I know that when you're out there, you can press the audio button on iNaturalist and it will take the recording. But that's a good question, and maybe I could look into that and sort of get back to people later on.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful because we've also lower down Sharon and also Christine have wondered whether we can submit Merlin recordings onto the project, whether that system can be used across. Do you know whether that's possible?
Yeah, I can have a look into that.
Okay, so we'll go through these questions later and work out who's asked which, and Hannah
Yeah.
can get back to you directly on that one. But they're really good thoughts.
Yeah.
And of course, being able to record sound is so useful for things that don't stay around to be photographed.
Yeah.
Peter says, can you make sure your info sheet about using iNaturalist on the iPhone makes it? Yes, so yes, sorry, that's about
Yeah.
that again. And then we've got something from the Upper Cumbrian Methodist Chapel, who clearly have been doing a lot of work and a lot of recording. They've been using iRecord. Don't know if you've anything you'd like to say about when iRecord is more appropriate than iNaturalist or.
Yeah, iRecord is also fantastic. So that's where I submit a lot of my records. And as you say, they have added the sort of photo ID functionality as well. Really great for UK species. Yeah, if this is working for you, definitely continue using that. We just recommend iNaturalist for beginners, really, because we think it's a little bit easier to use on the interface. But yeah, iRecord is excellent. And once the records in there have been verified, they will be sort of taken through to MBN Atlas through various sort of methods. There's a little flow chart I can find and link you to in the chat if that would be helpful.
Jenny asks whether on iNat you can see the observations from your own churchyard, as well as the map of everybody's observations. Yes, you can, can't you?
Yeah, so if you go on the interactive map and you zoom into the churchyard, then you should be able to sort of look around and see what people have found.
And we've got Catherine from Scotland. I run a green graveyard project in Scotland and we'll be setting up an iNaturalist project page to encourage local recorders to add their records. However, I note a few Scottish records on your iNaturalist map. Should we be using our own page instead? I thought it was just for churches in England and Wales. Well, I'm going to start by answering that and say, no, we love more records from Scotland. It's just that we're a small charity. We're based in England on the Welsh Marches. We haven't done a lot of work in Scotland yet, but we would dearly love to, and we'd love to have your records. I don't think, is there anything else you want to add to that one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Please do add any records from Scottish burial grounds as well. That would be very helpful for us.
And also, as we get more records from Scotland, we can then map sites. So we're sort of rather than we mapped England and Wales under a large funded project because it was an awful lot of work, as you can imagine. Whereas with Scotland, at the moment, we don't have a funded project for Scotland or Northern Ireland. So we add them piecemeal. When we receive records, we can then, Hannah can then map those and then gradually add those onto the MBN Atlas. So they will get added. May take a little while. Please be patient with us, but we will get them on there. And the more records we have, the more sites we'll be adding. Kate asked for a link of the webinar. That will be done by Anna in due course after the webinar's finished. And that will be live for quite a while for you. Gillian says, when I open the iNaturalist app, how do I check if it's classic or not?
So if you have an Android phone, you don't need to worry, you'll have the right one. If you have an iPhone, open it up, and I'm just looking at my own iPhone because I can see them both here. So I've got two apps next to each other. So I've got one that's green that says iNaturalist, and then I've got one it's got a sort of white background that says iNat Classic, and it's the iNat Classic one that you want to be using.
And if you've been using the previous, if you've been doing this for years, will you be on the wrong one or will you be on the right one?
So if you've been doing it for years, you can still go in and add your data to the burial grounds project. You'll just need to go do that on the sort of website version. But to be able to sort of not have to go in retrospectively and edit your record, we just recommend using the classic one.
Okay, thank you. Francine says, please can you show us on iClassic where we can add our location?
So for the iNat Classic, that should be that was the one I was using on the screen recording. But if you so that should show you kind of where to add it. But if you go have a look later and you're unsure, just pop me an email and I can help you out.
And we have another question from the Upper Cumbrian Methodist Chapel. Using iRecord, we can see an activity called Beautiful Burial Grounds. Is this the one we should link to, which will allow our records to go through to MBN?
Yes, please.
Yes, you're not using the wrong app. Fantastic. And they would like the flowchart. Yes, please. Sharon asks a tricky question. How long does it take for verified records to flow through to NBN?
That's a difficult question and one I can't give an exact answer to. So for a record on iNaturalist, sometimes you can get it through to research grade within a few hours. You'll get identifications. Sometimes it can take several days or indeed several weeks or months. And then it goes to iRecord, and that will be checked by people like the county recorders and people from sort of official recording schemes. And there's a lot of data coming into iRecord, so that can take quite a long time. So there is a bit of a backlog. So if you don't see your data immediately on NB Analyst, don't worry, it will hopefully end up there eventually. Just this is it's all run by volunteers. It's all those identifications are done by volunteers, so it can take a while.
And it is that verification stage that is the slowest bit, isn't it? Usually.
Yeah.
And I think I just sort of go back to something that you said, Hannah, which is that's why it's very good to take photos, whatever system you're using, because
Yeah.
obviously if an expert is trying to verify something, they've never heard of the recorder, they don't necessarily know the site, maybe they don't live nearby. If they have a photograph, they're far more likely to be able to verify it than if they're simply being asked to just believe somebody that they have no idea whether they have any experience at all. So a photograph is
Absolutely.
or sound recording is really
Yeah. And then once the verifiers get to know you, so for example, if I put something up on iRecord that's quite rare moth, for example, so I add a lot of moth records and the local moth people know who I am, so they'll probably just accept it as correct because they know that I've probably done my homework. So they will get to know you eventually as well.
So Liz gives us a useful little it's clearly uses press observe on the app toolbar for recording sound or photo library for uploading your video. So thank you, Liz, that's really useful. Anne asks, when I added iNaturalist Classic with a white background, it asked me if I wanted to go to the new app, which is one I already had, green background, so confused. Maybe
Yeah, I have noticed that. But if you're wanting to use the Beautiful Burial Ground project, you do have to use the classic.
I think also, Anne, if you're really struggling, do just get in touch with Hannah and
Yeah.
you can have a one-to-one conversation and try and sort that
Yeah,
out. Sounds like
always
you're
happy
both
to have a
dealing
phone
with the
call or
same
anything
problem.
with, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. You've given us that data flow. I just said, just to say, recording sound only seems to appear on iNaturalist Classic rather than the new iNaturalist app. Oh, okay. I didn't know that, but yeah. And the Upper Cumberland Chapel again, maybe please share details of the voting competition on Britain's favourite butterfly. Looks like the skipper butterflies are really on the list, but they're so lovely. So yes, please, that's lovely. Lovely to share that. Please, everybody click on that link and have a look at that. Yeah. Sharon's having trouble. Research grade records from last year still not on NBN. It can be painfully slow, Sharon. This is one of the reasons why we've put up a project and put up the iNaturalist map onto our website actually, is because it's so frustrating for people. Sarah says, we have a church garden with a small area where ashes are buried. Do you want our records? Yes, please. Yes, please. We would love your records. It just builds up that picture. And hopefully, as we've said, we might give you useful things to help you manage it as well. Catherine, thank you. It'd be fabulous to add our records to your project instead of reinventing the wheel. We've been going for 15 plus years, but now we want to extend the project properly with new funding, especially where recording. So yes, Hannah, perhaps you could send me your email. It also sounds like, Catherine, you might be a really suitable candidate for our Burial Grounds to Inspire webpage. So maybe Hannah, you and Catherine can have a bit of a chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Anna's put my email in the chat, so thank you.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you, Anna. And I think that's all of the questions. So we're fantastically well on time. There we are. 12:59. So thank you to everybody for attending this webinar. Lots of people will be watching it on catch up as well, but a good number of people are able to come and ask questions, so that's always lovely. Please do look at the other webinars as Hannah's told you, and we will be sharing this, so you'll have all of that information and all of those dates and everything that you can look at your leisure. Thank you very much. And thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.